I'll give you $1 million if you cure me, the millionaire smirked. Until the boy touched him. What if a billionaire, paralyzed and poisoned by his own cynicism, suddenly gets back on his feet after a strange ritual performed by a nameless street boy? What if this miracle doctor turns out to be a victim of his own heartless corporation? If someone had told Alexander Vance that his fate would be changed by a boy with a torn sleeve and a toy stethoscope, he would have laughed and said something snide. But that's exactly how it all began. Alexander Vance hated parks, especially on Sundays, especially this noisy one, with the sharp smell of popcorn and crowds of children who always seemed to run too close to his wheelchair. He hated their screams, their toys, their freedom. He sat in the shade of a large plane tree, surrounded by silence. Not because the park had gotten quieter, but because his security had politely but firmly shooed everyone away within a 20-meter radius. Vance had had a stroke 5 years ago. His left side was completely paralyzed. He had almost no feeling on his right. He could speak, he could think, he could despise, and he did so with the precision of a scalpel. What are you playing here? He snorted towards a group of children. We're doctors. A girl with 2 pigtails and a plastic clipboard replied cheerfully. We're saving lives. You're saving, he mocked. Do you know that everyone dies? Even you. Especially you, if you treat people as badly as you dress. The children were confused. One of them started to whimper. But one boy remained standing, short, thin, bareheaded, with a very serious gaze. A red stethoscope, a toy one, hung around his neck, but he held it like a surgeon holds a scalpel. And do you want to be cured? He asked calmly, looking directly into Vance's eyes. You. The mockery in Alexander's voice was almost affectionate. The best clinics in the world pay me for my treatments. They couldn't. And you, in exchange for a pastry, will fix my spinal cord. No, the boy replied. In exchange for $1 million. If you stand up after my treatment, you will give me $1 million. If not, nothing. Alexander looked at him with a long, studying gaze. He had seen many things. Liars, swindlers, fanatics. But in the eyes of this boy Lucas, as he would later learn, there was something else. A calmness foreign to children. A strange confidence. And how do you plan to do that? Trust is the main condition. You must allow me to perform a ritual. No laughing, no interfering, just trust. Vance smirked. His guards exchanged glances. One of them leaned in. Sir, do you want us to? No, he interrupted. Let him heal. It's interesting. Then we'll file a fraud report. Lucas took a small box from his backpack, cut from a shoebox. Inside were colorful ribbons, a small stone, and some kind of photograph. He laid it all out nearby, moving his hands, whispering something barely audible. Alexander watched him and felt something long forgotten stir deep inside. Something illogical. The boy touched his hand. His palm was warm, unusually warm. Done, he said. Tomorrow you will stand up. Don't forget about the $1 million. He gathered everything he had brought and left. Just like that. Without grand words, without a show. He walked away towards where the trees were thicker and the houses older. One of the guards chuckled. Brilliant. He didn't even try. Just waved his hands. Alexander also smirked, but with a strange aftertaste. He returned home in his usual gloom. Fell asleep in his technologically advanced bed with its automatic body-turning system, and woke up from pain. But the pain was different. It was something like a spasm. At first he thought it was a reaction to his medication, then another malfunction. But when he looked down, his eyes widened. The big toe on his right foot twitched. He tensed, tried to concentrate. And again, movement. He couldn't believe it. He called the nurse, then the doctor, then a whole team. His hands were shaking. For the first time in 5 years, he felt them shake not just from anger. Within 3 hours, he was standing against a wall with support. But he was standing. This is impossible, the neurologist said. You had a complete break in spinal cord conductivity. This is a miracle. This is not a miracle, Vance whispered. This is a debt. He remembered the boy's gaze, that calm voice. Tomorrow, you will stand up. He had stood. Now he had to find the one who had cured him. He dreamed he was running, clumsily, gasping for breath, but running. And at every turn, he was chased not by illness or death, but by a shadow with the boy's face. When he woke up, the sun beat against the windows with such audacity, as if it knew this day would be special. But unlike in the dream, there was no running here. Here there were slow, unsteady steps, the first in years. He held onto the railing like it was his last argument in a debate with reality. He took 10 steps from the bed to the chair. Each one cost him effort, but each one was real. The world inside him hummed with change. He didn't know how to explain it. The doctors didn't know either. Scans showed nothing supernatural. The spinal damage remained, but somehow the neural circuits had begun to reconnect. That didn't happen. Almost never, or very rarely, in a handful of cases. Spontaneous neuroregeneration, they said, and added, it's inexplicable, but perhaps unstable. He nodded, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no accident. He went to the park the very next day, without security, without announcement, without his chair. He just came and sat on the same bench under the plane tree. People didn't recognize him, a gray-haired man with a cane in a simple gray coat. He waited. Where is that boy? He asked the children playing nearby. Which one? The one with the red stethoscope. His name is Lucas. They exchanged glances and shrugged. No one knew. No one even remembered. Maybe he's from another district. He went there every day, sat from morning till evening, sometimes alone, sometimes in the crowd. Sometimes reporters approached him. The news of the miracle had begun to leak into the press. He brushed them off and looked for Lucas. One evening, when leaves were already flying across the asphalt, a disheveled man, in a smoke-saturated jacket, but with lively eyes, sat down next to him. You're looking for him? He asked quietly. Alexander looked at him distrustfully. Lucas, I know who you mean. I saw him do it. Where he is, I don't know exactly, but I've seen him a couple of times near the old school on the outskirts, where they tore the houses down. It's like a shelter there now, or something. The roof leaks, but no one cares. The address, the man named an intersection. Alexander took out his wallet, offered a bill. Not for money. The man waved him off. It's just good when the rich look for the right people, and not the other way around. The school he spoke of stood, as if ripped out of time. Graffiti on the walls, cracks in the windows stuffed with rags. A sign on the gate. Demolitions scheduled. But behind it were children's voices. Laughter. Someone was singing. He walked through the yard and pushed the door open. Inside, it smelled of dust, soup, and something warm and human. The walls were peeling, but covered in children's drawings. Dozens, maybe hundreds. He saw her first-hand old woman, in a headscarf with a tired face, but kind eyes. Excuse me, I'm looking for a boy named Lucas. She froze, then straightened up. And you are Alexander Vance? Yes. She nodded silently. He said you would come. Where is he? He's outside, but he'll be back soon. She motioned for him to follow, pointing to photographs on the wall. People, before and after. He stopped. His hand trembled when he saw the logo. His logo. Yes. These houses were demolished for your project. They relocated us to nowhere. There was no compensation. We didn't protest. We didn't have the strength. We stayed here, me, Lucas, and 8 other families. Alexander stood in silence. Every word from the grandmother hit him like a surgeon's precise strike. His businessman's memory clearly recalled the details. Eminent domain, liquidation, non-residential fund. He even remembered the meeting. Someone had said, some old folks and migrants live there, not a problem. He hadn't objected. Back then, he didn't care. And now he stood in a ruined shelter, where the boy who had saved him lived. Suddenly, Lucas appeared in the doorway, the same as before, but no longer looking like a toy. His eyes were more serious than a child's should be. He walked up and said, I knew you would come. Why did you do it? Alexander asked hoarsely. Because you were alone, and one person is not a verdict. Sometimes, it's even a miracle. He didn't ask about the million, didn't talk about promises, just came closer and said quietly, now it's your turn. He thought he knew the price of everything. Money, work, people. But that evening, walking through the dark corridors of the abandoned school with a bowl of soup in his hands, he understood he had never known the price of shame. The first days, he just came, sat in a corner, and watched. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes medicine, sometimes just sat in silence. No one drove him away, but no one rushed to hug him either. They regarded him with wary respect. Too well-dressed, too upright, an outsider. Alexander felt like he was under observation. They didn't trust him, and he accepted that. For the first time, he washed a floor. A real floor, rough, with paint drips and dried stains. The washing was slow. His legs gave way, his arms ached. He didn't complain. Lucas just silently handed him a rag and watched. Everything changed one evening. It was raining. The roof was leaking over the old storage room. Water dripped right onto a child's bed. Carmen, Lucas's grandmother, tried to plug the leak with a blanket. "You'll fall," she said. "Tired, I've already fallen." "Can't fall any lower," he replied. He took off his cashmere coat, climbed onto the windowsill, and started propping up the roof with a board. When he returned to the floor, barefoot, wet, with dirty hands, the children laughed with him for the first time, not just near him. That night, he stayed over on an old mattress in the hallway, without a pillow, without the familiar buttons by the bed. Just him, a blanket, and silence. In the morning, Carmen brought him a cup of tea, handed it to him silently, and left. He understood he was now one of them. Lucas watched him with quiet wariness. He didn't show open delight, just accepted. Here was the man who had been on top. Now here, next to them, without a crown, without a chair. "Why didn't you say anything about the demolition?" Alexander asked one day. "What would it have changed?" The boy shrugged. "We wouldn't have gotten the house back. Not my grandpa, who died there, nor the neighbors who were scattered. I thought it was better for you to see it for yourself." "I see." He saw not just destruction. He saw the consequences. Before, numbers in reports were abstract. 32 houses demolished. It sounded like a plan, not a tragedy. Now those houses slept in corridors, wore torn shoes, taught children to read by windows where the wind whistled through cracks. Every evening, he brought something needed to the shelter. First warm clothes, then a portable generator, then work gloves, nails, flashlights. He didn't call his assistants, didn't take selfies. He did it all himself. And the more he did, the clearer he understood. He wasn't fixing, he was returning. One evening, Lucas approached him. "You could just buy everything, like before. Why don't you do that?" "Because before, I built on paper. Now I build with my hands. And only this way do I understand the cost of every brick." Lucas looked at him for a long time. "There's something new in your eyes. What is it?" "Life." That evening, they played cards for the first time. Lucas, 2 other children, and Alexander. He lost, but laughed, and couldn't remember the last time. Laughter wasn't a defense, but a sincere response from within. The next day, he brought a project with him. "What is it?" Carmen asked. "A plan. I want to rebuild the houses. First 2, near the park, then the school, then the whole neighborhood. But not skyscrapers. Real homes for people." She looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "People don't need palaces. They need faith that they won't be thrown out. I took that faith. Now, I want to return it." He understood this was only the beginning. To return didn't mean to erase, but perhaps one could learn to live with it and do things differently. That same evening, Lucas sat on the windowsill, writing something in a notebook. Alexander approached. "What are you writing?" "A list of people to help. Who else is left on the street? Who is sick? I want to gather them all. You're still a child, but not a stupid one." Alexander nodded. He also started keeping a list, in his own notebook, of those he owed. And he started with himself. The morning began with a strange silence. No sound of Carmen's footsteps in the kitchen. None of her grumbling. Even the kettle was silent, and that was scarier than any scream. Lucas was the first to notice that his grandmother hadn't gotten up. He went to her room, knocked softly, then pushed the door open. Carmen was lying on her side, with a pale face and ragged breathing. Her lips were dry, her skin a grayish yellow. She opened her eyes, looking somewhere past him, and whispered, "Water." Lucas rushed to the kitchen, but his hands were shaking, and he almost dropped the glass. Grandma drank almost none of the water. A sip, and she closed her eyes again. Alexander was in the basement at the time, helping to reinforce the beams. They called for him, and he came immediately. When he saw Carmen, his heart clenched not from fear, but from that feeling he used to call weakness. Now he knew it was love. "Did you call a doctor?" he asked. "The old nurse said it might be her kidney, maybe failure. And we have no money, no car," someone replied. "We have both," Alexander said. "Get ready." They drove in 3. Him, Lucas, and Carmen, who was carefully seated in the back seat. On the road, the boy was silent, just holding his grandmother's hand, and whispering, "You'll get better. I'll do it like with Alexander. I can." At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Emergency tests, a stretcher, a gurney. Lucas didn't leave her side. He tried again. The same ritual as in the park. The same movements, the same words. Alexander saw him take out that same box, with ribbons and stones, place it by the head of the bed, close his eyes, stay silent, wait. Nothing. The doctors came out half an hour later. A middle-aged woman with a tired but kind face looked at them. Your grandmother's left kidney has failed. The right one is also on the brink. She needs a transplant. Urgently, I'll pay. Whatever is needed, Alexander said. Money is not a problem. The issue is a donor. There's almost no time.
Lucas stood like a stone. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. He looked at his hands, the same ones that had once healed. And now, emptiness. Why isn't it working? He whispered. Why not now? Alexander sat down next to him. His voice was low and hoarse. Because you're not God, Lucas. You're just a boy. You gave me something science couldn't. But this is different. This is the body, pain, blood. He fell silent, then added quietly, maybe now it's my turn? The next morning, he got tested. It was a match. Full compatibility. You're not a young man, the doctor said cautiously. And with only one functioning kidney, it's a risk. Are you sure? Absolutely. Before signing the papers, Lucas approached him. Why are you doing this? Alexander looked at him for a long time. So you don't lose what I lost forever. What? Someone who loves you. Without conditions, without fear, without calculation. This isn't a debt. This is, perhaps, the only thing that truly matters. The operation was successful. Carmen smiled the next day and kissed his palm. I knew you were nearby, she whispered. He wanted to say it wasn't he who saved her, but he didn't. She already knew. Alexander came to later, lying with his eyes closed. The weakness was unbearable, but of a different, lighter kind. Lucas entered the room. He had an envelope in his hands. He silently placed it on the bedside table. What is that? Alexander asked. A check? $1 million. Did you sign it? I'm tearing it up. He took the paper from the envelope, ripped it in half, and threw it in the trash. Why? Lucas sat down next to him. Because real deeds aren't bought. You don't get paid for what you did. You get thanked for it. He stood up and left, leaving silence behind him. Alexander closed his eyes and, for the first time in many years, smiled. Not a business smile, not a polite one, not a fake one. A real one. He knew there was much pain ahead, much work, but he already knew what to live for. 3 months after being discharged, Alexander Vance was digging earth with a small shovel, his side bandaged, in a thick work shirt. He was laying a trench for a water pipe, and if anyone who knew him a year ago had seen it, they wouldn't have believed it. Be careful, don't strain yourself, a nurse said, watching his movements. I already gave away a kidney. My muscles will manage somehow, he replied with a smirk. He had lost weight, his hair was grayer, he walked slowly with a cane, but there was something new in his every movement. Determination, meaning, purpose. In the former abandoned school, work was now in full swing. According to his project, the Carmen Institute was being created here, an educational center for children from destroyed neighborhoods. Not just a shelter, not just a classroom with wallpaper, but a real place where children could live and learn safely and with interest. Every morning, he came there as a worker, sometimes with papers, more often with tools. He wasn't a manager, but a participant. He lifted boxes, painted walls, checked ventilation. The children were no longer afraid of him. He became Uncle Alexander to them, sometimes with candy, sometimes with jokes, sometimes just present. He sat on the floor with them, built with blocks, read fairy tales. Were you really a billionaire? One boy asked once. I was, he replied. And now I'm a person. He no longer lived in a mansion. He bought a small apartment near the school, cooked for himself, did his own laundry. Sometimes Carmen kept an eye on his diet, but otherwise, he was learning to live again without servants, without drivers, without isolation from the world. Lucas was almost no longer a child. He had shot up, wore glasses, kept notebooks with neat notes. He was taking special courses that Alexander himself paid for and was preparing to apply to medical college. It was he who became the first to speak at the opening of the Carmen Institute. The hall was full. Children, parents, volunteers, construction workers, cameras, officials, everyone was there. But he was the main one. Lucas stood on stage in a light shirt and with the same serious expression he had worn many months ago when he looked at the man in the wheelchair under the plane tree. Once I played doctor, he began, and told one man I could cure him. I was only 9 then. And you know what? I didn't know if I could, but I believed. He looked around the hall, and then he cured me. Not my body, but my soul. He showed that any evil done to others can begin to be corrected. Not with money, with hands, with choices, with actions. I want to become a doctor. I want to help others, like I was once helped. He turned around. In the front row sat Alexander with his cane, but without a suit. Just corduroy pants, a shirt, eyes full of tears. Lucas walked over and hugged him. You will always be the one who cured me, he said quietly. They were silent. Words weren't needed. The final scene. The same park where it all began. Alexander Vance sat on a bench under the plane tree. Children were playing doctor. Lucas, now the older one, stood nearby, watching. A little girl ran up to him. Uncle Alexander, have you been to the doctor? Yes, he smiled. Which one? The one who didn't treat the body, but treated the soul. He closed his eyes and inhaled the smell of summer, the wind, the laughter, the leaves. All this had been there before, but he hadn't heard it. Now he heard. He was no longer a billionaire. He was a man who had found redemption. And most importantly, he understood that a true legacy isn't the numbers in a bank, but what you leave for others. Through actions, through love, through those who carry on.